Hello, and welcome to the final episode of the Hidden Histories web series. I'm Sam Bugeja Blanshard, and in this episode I will be drawing to a close this epic uncovering of the brave and resilient people of Essex whose impact on women's rights and opportunities is most pivotal. Within this series we have detailed the lives and accounts of women from Essex, who, whilst having moved to all corners of the country, wholeheartedly embodied the spirit of this county. In this conclusion to their stories, it is paramount to highlight some of their contemporaries who, alongside the women we have detailed, were at the forefront of the local conversation towards women's rights. The Courtauld family, whose members have surfaced multiple times during this series, were one of the most prominent local families in the movement towards women's rights. As early as 1866, two members of the Courtauld family were amongst those who signed the first mass suffrage petition to Parliament, of which is considered to be the birth of the modern suffrage movement. Alongside Catherine and Catherine, another Courtauld was most prominent in the local suffrage scene, Catherine and Samuel's sister, Sidney Renee Courtauld. Sidney and Catherine would host garden parties at their home at Frith Hill in Bocken, which, from 1910, was the unofficial centre for the Mid-Bucks Suffrage Society. The two sisters are said to have inherited their motivations from their mother Sarah, who was an avid supporter of universal education and sat on many school boards. Sidney campaigned for women to have full access to Cambridge University, where she herself studied between 1892 and 1894. She joined the Women's Universal Settlement, which placed university-educated women in the poorest parts of London to work as social workers to help improve the welfare of poor women and children, mainly through education and social care. As well as her work for the Mid-Bucks Suffrage Society, Sidney was also a member of the London Society for Women's Suffrage and served as secretary for the North and East Essex branch of the NUWSS in 1913. She also donated to the National Society for Equal Citizenship, which evolved from the NUWSS. Sidney never married, but upon her sister's marriage to Wilfred Dowman, she moved to Potton End, where she donated land and a community hall to the village. In 1937, she donated money to secure part of the Ashridge estate for the National Trust. During the First World War, the Mid-Bucks suffragists stopped actively campaigning for the vote alongside most other suffrage societies. Instead, they put their administrative and fundraising skills to use for the war effort, principally funding hospital beds and medical supplies. Many of our local suffragists had hospital beds and even whole wards named after them. The Common Cause of the 21st of September 1917 lists both Catherine and Sidney Courtauld as both donating £100, worth over £8,000 in today's currency, to the Scottish Women's Hospital Service, of which Eliza Vaughan was also a contributor to. It is interesting to note that in Eliza's account of her march from Colchester to London, she fails to mention the speech made by Lady Evelyn Strutt in the town square of Witham. As mentioned in episode 6, Lady Evelyn Strutt was married to the 3rd Baron Raleigh, John William Strutt, who was a prevalent scientist and first-wave feminist. Strutt would often support his wife in matters surrounding women's rights, most notably at a Conservative meeting in Witham Public Hall, where he announced that women's householders should be given the vote. Lady Strutt's sister, Eleanor Mildred Sidgwick, was also an early suffragist, and whose husband, Henry Sidgwick, was a professor of moral philosophy at the University of Cambridge, and a fellow first-wave feminist alongside his colleague and brother-in-law, John William Strutt. Whilst these men and women were not as fully immersed into the movement as the other women we have mentioned in this series, their background contributions, albeit through places of wealth and prestige, were crucial to consolidating the conversation on women's rights, made so powerful by the likes of Catherine, Grace, Louisa, Catherine and Eliza, whose names have been immortalised in history through this series. These have been the stories of a philanthropist,
a rebel,
a victim,
a farmer,
and a suffragette.
I have been Sam Bugeja Blanshard.
I have been Liam Cox.
And I have been Eve Garner. And this is Hidden Histories, the forgotten stories of the women of Essex.